Hello viewers, welcome to my channel Science and Technology. In today's show, Camera Tuesday, we're going to talk about understanding camera uses part 1. It's a deep topic, so let's dive deep into it. So what exactly is the reality? Well, the reason why I'm making this video is that I'm getting way too much basically conversations about cameras that does not have any heads or tails. It's just like nebulous. Now the reason why that would be is simply because people are thinking in terms of camera, not in terms of uses is the only way. Basically, you must know your own use case. What exactly am I gonna do with it? Only then you can buy a camera that you have very low chance of regretting it. For example, I bought this Canon 800D. Now I was a nerd and I did thorough amount of research. On top of that, I was very clear about what I actually wanted to do with it. So I knew from day one I would be really upset if I had a camera that did not do proper video. Now be mindful, I was a game artist then, so not like a YouTuber. So even then I had that that niche requirement that I wanted it, and it paid off. I literally started my own channel based on it and actually became a YouTuber. So I'm very happy with that. Why did that happen? Because I waited when Canon released this one. They had a new technology, Canon dual pixel autofocus. I waited because I knew my use case needed it. Before this, all cameras, be it Nikon, and that time only when Nikon and Canon were serious, both DSLRs had video functions, a lot of good functions, full HD, 60 FPS, awesome, 30-minute limit. Again, that limit is not because of them, that is because of somebody was smoking in European Union. So I was happy with that, but then I noticed very clearly on that user interface of Canon was genuinely better than Nikon. So I was like, okay, that is very early on. Nowadays, at least both of them are kind of similar. Back in the days, it was horrible. So anyone has like Nikon D5500, one of my friend has that. Compare this to this, yeah, it does not even have live interaction. Again, I paid attention to all of these factors because my use case was that this is a camera and I want to use it rather than just buy it and put it in an Almira. So I wanted to be damn sure that it has easy usability, good video function, and it paid off. And the mic input paid off. So only then I could buy that. And were there a different camera? Yeah, Sony was actually APS-C lineup started to get momentum there, but it did not have flip out screen. So what I'm doing right now would not have been very easy without that flip out screen. So it did not hurt me, even though I spent boatload of money, like almost 2 years of my savings. But again, it paid off. I had very minimal regret with that. Why? Because I knew about my use cases. So be mindful, every camera right now, if you buy any camera, any good camera with a good brand from, let's say, Nikon, Canon, Sony, Fuji, Panasonic, there is a very good chance it's going to do everything. Only difference would be it would be great at only few things, and you have to line that part up, meaning you want this exact feature set because that's your primary requirement, then everything else is bonus. But if you misaligned it, basically, oh, this camera is good but for different kind of people, and you bought it because so many people said it's good because you did not pay attention to your use case, yeah, it's not gonna work out. So you have to be very mindful because every camera is very good at only few things. It can do everything, it's just that very good at only few things. That's why there are so many models. So you have to know what suits you and what is your use case. Without that, you are poof. And another young trap is that you never budget for basically ecosystem. If you are very dumb, you will only focus on camera body price or like a kit if you are buying a kit in a sale. But here's the deal, you have to think very calmly, very thoroughly. For example, if you are just rushing into it, you may buy, hey, Canon's cameras are bodies are quite cheap actually. In India, it's surprisingly cheap. Like A7C Mark II is a good camera. I would have bought it. It's just that it's way too expensive. Like it would be cheaper for me to go to a airport, take a flight to America, buy it from there and come here. Yeah. So it's like a little, and in that contrast, Canon looks like awesome. Now here's the deal. Why did not I buy it? Lenses. Canon does not allow third-party lenses, and I do not have the money to buy first-party all of them. And not to mention, their first-party lenses are Mark 1. Basically, R series, they redid it. This is the first time their latest lens is more optically poor compared to the last one. Basically, if you want best 70-200 f2.8, buy the EF1, put a mount adapter. That's how useless this one is. Like, they wanted to make it compact. It's like, Mark 1 should never be compact. Mark 1 should be optically awesome because that's your flagship. You make it awesome, then you're like, hey, if that awesome is too big and clunky, here's a portable one. But they're like, let's start with portable one, and then people are like, hey, why the heck it has so much dust issue and other things. This is the first time where people were like genuinely like, Canon, what the hell? So again, if you did not account for it and you fell for the trap like Canon laid out, where it's like, we have opened our lens font. No, you didn't. All they did is open it for APS-C, not full frame. But you're not paying attention to it. You'll be like, I bought the Canon camera and you're happy with it, and you're like, the moment you go to buy a lens, hey, why it's not available? Okay, let me look into R mount lenses, and you're like, Always pay attention to ecosystem price. Again, the same applies with Sony. So let's say you bought a Sony camera, you're like, hey, it has the lenses that I want, it has third-party lenses I want, the batteries are quite affordable, because again, they use one battery model for whole series. That's super awesome. Less e-waste, more awesomeness. I am totally all here for it. But then you look into their memory card. If you do not know, they use CFast Express Type A. Now, CFast Express is an association. CFast, basically, Compact Flash Association. They made cards, that CFast card, that was the old standard. Then SD card became a standard. Again, SD association is different. CFast made a SATA SSD card. It did not work very well. So, somewhere around in late 2010, they got in bed together with Sony, and CFast, they made a baby. So basically, CFast Association gave their badge open circuitry, basically the platform. No company will, basically Canon will not use a product that is from Sony. Canon can use an association product like USB association, Bluetooth association. So Compact Flash was association. Sony gave them XQD. So this card that you see, CFast Type B, this is basically XQD. Now, this is the most retarded thing I have seen Sony do, and be mindful, I'm old enough where I remember Sony was retarded enough to make Magic Gate. Tell me what it is. That's how old I am. So, they literally has SUD, CFast rebranded it, tweaked parameters, be mindful, that's why it's backwards and forward compatible. So, if you had bought any Nikon camera that used XQD with a firmware update, you can put CFast card. Nothing changes electrically. So this has 2 lanes of PCI Express. This has 1 lane of PCI Express. So this will work twice as fast compared to the single lane one. There's supposed to be a 4-lane variant made for cinema camera, but I have not seen it used. So this Type B is used by basically XQD. Everybody who had XQD, they used it. Used by Nikon, Canon, Fuji, Panasonic. So this is mass produced. What does that mean for you and me? Well, if I want a 1 terabyte CFast Express Type A for my Sony camera, that means I have to pay 44,000. Now here's the, do not focus on the currency, just focus on that number, 44,000, 1 terabyte. Okay. How much 1 terabyte for Type B? 1 terabyte for 1 TB is 15,000. Huge gap, meaning for 1 terabyte, I could literally buy 3 of 1 terabytes. Like I can just like 3 times the cost. Oh, by the way, this is like also twice as fast. So faster and cheaper. Why? Mass production. This was never mass produced. This is like the Sony just like, what if we created the same garbage? That's the reason why we lost our Sony Ericsson. So again, if you did not account for it, you may be shocked how expensive card readers are. Even with SD card readers, if you have a very cheap SD card reader, yeah, you will find out 20 Mbps is not fast enough. If you have a USB 3, again, that's better. But again, how much better? Because for example, because I do video for a living, I want to save as much time as possible. So I put a UHS 2 card in my UHS 1 compatible camera. Is that a waste of money? No. While writing it has no effect, it does not improve the buffer performance. It does improve one thing. I pull it out, I dump into camera, basically dump it to my computer. Back in the old days of USB 3.0 and UHS 1, I was only getting 80 Mbps. Now I'm getting 280 Mbps. Sometimes it does stabilize at 250. So dumping the memory into my computer became much quicker. And because I do it every day, that time saving piles up. So you have to be very mindful. You have to study the whole ecosystem of what is the battery cost. What is the, at least you must start with 2 batteries, must. And you must have like at least 1 good card reader. Because yeah, thankfully Sony had the wisdom that even though they were loose motioning, you can, especially if you have A7, anything above A7 Mark IV generally have 10 Gbps card reader inbuilt into them. So even with USB, you can dump files at quite high speed. Again, you would sooner or later you will prefer a card reader, but if you have nothing, you will not be stranded, so to say. But again, if you have a cheaper one like A7C Mark II, that has 5 Gbps, meaning slower one, and these cards do exceed that speed. So you see, that's why like you have to be very mindful of the whole ecosystem. Some scenarios you will be like, hey, what is necessary for you? If storage is necessary for you, do not look into this. Any camera that has CFast A, which only one company does, you will be better off with CFast Type B. Even if you have to buy 2 of them, you will be better off. So please be mindful of the whole ecosystem cost. Failure to do so, you will suffer the consequence known as cost overrun. All of them are there. Pay attention. So let's take a simple look. Many people will say, I just want photography, right? That's the common saying. I just want photography. So what does that ecosystem mean? Use case means photography only. Well, it's a very lens focused ecosystem. Now, let's say you are a starter. You had just thinking to jumping into this. Which lenses would you recommend? But here's the, there are millions of lenses. Literally 100 models are active at any given moment in time. So how would you know which to buy? Here's the go old school. As in, we have three Holy Trinity lenses. That's why Holy Trinity lenses. And every company, Panasonic, Fuji, Nikon, Canon, Sony, all of them make that Holy Trinity lenses. So I would recommend go from 24 to 70 f2.8 and 70 to 200 f2.8. If you have these two lens set, you are covered. Meaning, in most scenario, you should be more than good enough, unless you are dealing specifically with ultra wide. And again, 24 on a full frame is actually wide enough where you're like, okay, you can work with it. It's not useless. So, and this will give you a good feel for things, good understanding. Like many people prefer 70-200, especially if they want to get paid. Why? Big lens. Now, like, does that matter? Absolutely. You pull out a big ass lens, people are like, professional. You pull out a tiny ass camera, even though it's tangibly it could be better, people are like, nah, does not feel like, pro. And be mindful, our phones have become huge, so you really want to, mine's bigger than yours, you really want to make sure that you have that. If otherwise, like, people will be very stingy with payment. Some photographers literally have spare cameras just hanging out, just so sure, hey, I'm professional, bro. So it's one of those things. So these two lenses, again, whichever brand, whichever company, because it's available in everything. It's available in Sigma, it's available in Tamron, it's available in Voigtlander, it's available in almost everything. Voigtlander has it or not, I'm not exactly sure about that, but most likely they will. So you start with these two lenses, it takes care of almost everything, and especially 70 to 200 is really good for portraiture. And for event photography, it allows you to do what we call candid photography, meaning if you are, let's say, taking a photo of a bride, you do not want to be like in her face. You do not want to take a camera and put it in her face. Like 1 or 2 times people will be comfortable with that, but if you do that, it will start to take away from the event. So people do not like that. So you want to be far away. How do you far away? Use this lens. Now you can get random scenes where she's not looking at the camera, and you're just like, she's interacting, and that moment, if you do it right, like some of the photographs are like, whoa, how did you capture this? Where is this camera? Like, in the moment people started like, whoa, what, when this happened? That's awesome. So this lens is known for that. 70 to 200 is not this exact lens, 70 to 200 is. So you can buy that. Now, another aspect is, what are you dealing with? Are you dealing with a JPEG or are you dealing with RAW? Many people do not appreciate the hard work that it takes after photography. They are like totally cool with, oh, you're doing photography, it's cool and awesome. They will not pay you for like, hey, it takes time to process it, and they might even get irritated. Like, hey, you took the photo, why, like digital photo, why you're taking time to develop it? So many times people will be like, hey, I'm just like, take the photo, give the JPEG. So in those scenarios, you have to study it. Like, you have to study which camera has best JPEG engine, and that JPEG engine has color signature into it. RAW has no color signature. You can change it. You can go YOLO on it. But JPEG is a baked file. So once you get it, you can't tweak it really. So you may be like, hey, many people prefer Nikon just for this reason. Nikon is genuinely good with their JPEG engine, meaning the files that are coming off. Again, let this be very clear. This is from an Indian point of view. So Indian skin tone and Indian ecosystem render surprisingly well in Nikon. And many other places will be like, hey, Fuji really renders this sort of ecosystem quite well. So you have to be mindful of that. Do you need it or not? Is it like your workflow requires it or not? Another aspect is, what is your social media speed? Now again, when you're getting married, capturing photos of younglings who haven't had their first divorce, so again they will be very excited, and they're like, the moment these things happen, vows happen or whatever happens, they're like, son, photo man. So yeah, you do need very high speed. Again, then if your clientele is like, in their second marriage, in those times they're like, they will wait because they know a marriage is useless. So in those scenarios they'll be waiting. Again, if you're dealing with that second client base, you do not need to worry about social media speed, but you're dealing with younglings, you have to worry about social media speed. In those scenarios, you have to know what is the application of the camera manufacturer. Every camera company has it. Canon, Nikon, Sony, Fuji, Panasonic, all of them are garbage. And here's the deal, some of them are ultra garbage. For example, I have this. This has Wi-Fi. This has the ability to dump file. It just does not allow you to transfer raw files. Why not? F the customer. There is no logical reason for it. It's my camera. I paid for it. It's like, no, I will not allow you to. Like, you will not be able to work on it. Here's the deal. Photoshop is available in modern mobile phone with actual horsepower, meaning it can actually do things. Seed Studio, if I'm not mistaken, that's another application that I use. You can directly process raw files in your mobile phone, in your tablet. But the companies are like, no, you cannot transfer it. Like, it's easier to like pull out the SD card, put a card reader, put it through USB on the go, and then dump file. That's easier. So be mindful. You have to be thorough about that. If you need to have social media coverage, as in like people take the photos and they need it right now, you have to be mindful of that. You have to study about that ecosystem. Like I have seen crew where like 4 or 5 are photographers and one person is just there. They are collecting data from how using ancient technology known as file transfer protocol. Is ancient, horribly slow, but somebody, if they're sitting there managing it, they can get all the files, sync it. Again, from a backup point of view, it's also very good. So they sync it, they back it up, and they're like, if they find any photos that are like whoa, just like whoa, they're like instantly polish it and make it presentable, send it on Instagram. So do you need that? Again, it's up to you. Then you have shooting vector wise, like what vectors you need good shooting accuracy, and you do need speed, meaning especially if you are dealing with anything that can happen very quickly, sports, birds, things of that nature. You need speed, like 8 fps, 10 fps, 20 fps, 120 fps, all of that. Yeah, you do need speed. So be mindful. Photography is a very lens-centric ecosystem. These two lenses are a very good starting point. You have to be mindful. Do you need RAW or do you need to JPEG? If you are looking for JPEG only ecosystem, pay attention to the JPEG engine. Do you need social media? Or if you have sorted all of these out, then you figure out what is the speed and autofocus reliability. Now then we come to something like this that you are watching, that is presentation style. So again, in this scenario, you do have some luxuries. You do not need wide aperture lenses. Small aperture will work very well, and again, it's desirable. And many times you will see people, especially in conferences, they have like ancient handycams. Why? Small apertures. It's desirable actually. So once you do it small aperture, it puts everything in focus. Autofocus does not matter. That's why like old handycams had autofocus. It has like such a a wide, not shallow, like what would be opposite of shallow depth of field, that is like almost everything was in focus. So unless it was like very close to it, you did not have to worry about it. So that is a good advantage you can have if you have a small aperture. So however, there is a consequence. If you're dealing with any sort of setup like this, you would be shocked how much lights you need. For example, I have this sort of tubes. I have 6 of this just there in order to light the whole scene. Now, be mindful, this sort of tube should not be used. This is just a simple light tube, 20 watts. I have 6 of those, and they call it high, basically excellent CRI. Yeah, CRI as in color rendering index. Now, these puppies are rated at 85% or 80%. That's not good enough. If you want video work, try to go for 90 or 95. And yes, that's the reason why video lights are so expensive. Same 20 watt video light would be at least 5 times more expensive than this. Why? CRI. And if you have true quality, like high quality CRI, the difference is significant, especially if you are watching on a big screen. It's a big difference. Now, like, can't I fix any post? No. Law of physics applies. Garbage in equals garbage out. So if you have a garbage light source, output will be garbage. So, but if you are doing this presentation, again, try to find a way to have boatload of light, then try to find a way to have a very high quality light. Those things will help a lot. Or have a scenario where you have like a window that is like, letting natural light come in. That's also works. Again, just put a white sheet on top to act as a diffuser. So you have to do that. Now be mindful, projectors are not welcome here. If you want to do this sort of system for classes, presentations or things like that, do not try to deal with projector. It's just not worth it. Let that be very clear. Just not worth it. The era of projector is gone. Even in this sort of system, I was recently in the Scale conference. They no longer deal with this. They just have LED wall there. It's like we have reached that point where it's like projectors are just not worth it. This sort of shadow thing, just not worth it. Basically get a proper LCD, like LCD or OLED, whatever have you, and you can get some huge ones nowadays. Like I am trying to contact them, and their minimum size is freaking 65 inches. This TV is 55. So it starts, the smallest starts as 65 inches and it goes to like 85 inches. So you can do a lot with TVs nowadays, and again, cost is not as expensive or stupendously expensive as it used to be. So now again, that's the setup part. What about your camera? Camera must have long recording limit. So meaning you cannot use any early generations of Nikons and Sony and Canons. Why? Because the European Union was still smoking and they were still 30-minute recording limit. Again, if you notice any camera that has says 2959 recording limit, that's why. EU had a law that if you record more than 30 minutes, it would be considered a video camera and the tax bracket would be increased. So companies did not do it. One company did, Panasonic with GH5. That's why GH5 back in the day did not had a recording limit. They just paid the tax. Again, consequence was it was released at a similar-ish time frame where A7 Mark III was released. Both of them had the same cost, and one had like literally half the size of the sensor, micro four third versus full frame. So thankfully that law has been revoked, but you have to be mindful. Please look into latest cameras. Do not look into cameras that are like, earlier releases. They do not have that unlimited recording. So that's the first thing. It should not have an inherent limit. So some of the very cheap Panasonic that has inherent limit of 9 minutes, 10 minutes, no. So that's again Fuji also. Be very mindful of that. So no recording limit, that's the first. Second, no overheating. Now overheating, there are two types of overheating. One overheating is just like it gets hot when you're using it and it tries to dump the heat. Okay. Second overheating is that it's poorly designed, like Canon's first foray into basically R5. Now problem with that design was it was insulator. So people who do not understand insulator, they were so happy about this, like this camera I can take it into desert, it shoots. Yeah, insulator works, sorry about the lightning, insulator works both ways, meaning if you put it in desert, the desert heat cannot go inside. Here's the problem, inside heat cannot go out, and people who were shooting with this, they were having very hard time to cooling it out. Once they started, once they got their 15 minutes 20-minute work done, after that it was just useless. They couldn't put it in a fridge, it will still not cool down. Why? Insulated design. So that's what we call poor. You cannot have a camera from that. If you are doing any sort of long-term recording, yeah, you will be frustrated. So you cannot have something like that. Like for example, Fuji's, they realized that one of the cameras, they are actually good in terms of video. Not all of them, be mindful, many of them have weird limits. So one of them are good, but they realized it's a hot, again, it gets hot. So what they have a module that you can plonk in on the back, it cools. There is a fan that it cools. You can buy into Panasonic, it has cooling fans, because they know that like at some point you have to cooling fan. Sony, again, while it does not have cooling fans, they have the advantage where they're like, hey, what if you put a USB fan and the chassis is acting as a heat sink, so you can cool it away. You have to be mindful of that. Long recording times, no overheating, and that's why handycams are still sold, simply because in this sort of ecosystem, handycams are like, bro, I got this. HDMI output is the best way of capturing it. If you have a setup where it's like, this is the camera, this is all it's gonna do, go with HDMI. Because while the setup cost will be higher, it's far more stable, it's far more easier for the camera. If camera is trying to do any processing, like trying to send it out through USB-C, it does not last very long, as in like it heats up too much. HDMI is far better. Again, many camera could do it, but I hate Canon for this. Like mine camera has like a unclean HDMI output. It gets a square block. Again, if it did not had a block on my face, I could actually use this for streaming and get really good quality out of it. So but nowadays that's not an issue. Most cameras, you have clean HDMI output and you can get really good work out of it. And again, capture cards are also not that expensive. USB-C, if you want convenient setup, not recommended, but again, if it's like barely 30 minutes or 40 minutes work, go for that. External power, that's a requirement. You must have a way of properly, just plonking it down permanently. And again, handycams make a return because of that, because many handycams just have a barrel jack. You can just plonk a cable there and just like, I got this. And again, you can have USB power bank, or you can have dummy batteries. Long-term projects, dummy battery. These are there. Now, how do you judge the quality of basically the scene that you're going to get out of it? Well, you have to use what we call good dynamic range. You must have a good range, basically how, dull scene it can render properly. As in, because again, if you will try to make your TV as bright as possible, you will try to make light as bright as possible, or you will reach a point where there will be equilibrium, but shades will be compressed. If you do not have a good camera with good, what you call dynamic range, you will find it to be lacking. Exposure control, if you do not find that to be adequate, just make it manual. Again, changing exposures are far more frustrating rather than just like a fixed kind of exposure. So this is the presentation use case. See how different it is from photography. Now we come to another aspect, ENG, electronic news gathering. Now this puppy is basically means on leg. Like recently I did to IIT Kanpur, and I had a different sort of shooting there. I did that. Then I went to basically a scale conference. There also I did a lot of ENG sort of work. Basically I was going to the booth and capturing footages of that. Everything is awesome, everything is fine and dandy, but it was not this camera's priority. This camera was made before this era was possible, so to say. So walking around camera, what is primary requirement? It must have a good image stabilization. Be mindful, you can carry a tripod, people do. It's not recommended, people do not like you, and sometimes some like big conference, they flat out will like so can you please remove it. So the best solution at that point becomes a monopod. So you can just have a monopod, because again, it does not block out a large area. That's what people hate, especially in conference organization. You do not want a scenario where you are blocking the area. So monopods are recommended, or you can just have a gimbal sort of setup. That's far more pleasant for people. So good image stabilization is very good requirement. Now autofocus, video autofocus, high quality video autofocus is a compulsory requirement for this. You cannot rely on that. It's good enough. No, bro, no. You need autofocus where it's like, I got this. And weight matters a lot. This is one thing, as you are young, your muscles are like, I got this, fam. You do not think too much about it. But you will start to think about it if you have to carry this for hours. And especially for unfortunate people who came from sitting jobs and realized we have a slip disc. Yeah, weight matters far more than you think. So, and again, even for gimbal, you can have a same gimbal that has a rating of 1 kilogram to 4 kilogram. It could be like a very quality gimbal, and it can actually handle 4 kilogram. You should not load it to 4 kilogram. Like, you will find it is like, if you make it too light, it's too jittery. But if you find it like, hey, what if I have a camera setup, camera lens and all that jazz, 3 kilogram, same setup, 1.5 kilogram, you'll find 1.5 kilogram to be far long lasting on the battery, and you will be far less tired. So it's one of those things that you do not think about it. But again, in ENG, it's a requirement. That's why all the professional ENG cameras, they have shoulder mounts. They do not even deal with, oh, what if you have like this? Nah, it's not going to last. You must have a shoulder cam. So we have learned this the hard way. Like, again, see, be mindful. He was a big deal when I was getting into cameras and all that. Casey Neistat. That time was like, DSLR. He was like very big at those days. Like, he was directly using 5D Mark 3, if I'm not mistaken, Mark 3 or Mark 2, to directly shoot videos. That was like, whoa. Like, actual handheld doing that is like, because again, that was a full frame camera with quality lens. Is like, like you have to be like, so it matters a lot. Again, if you are built like a tank, GG for you. I'm not, so I'm reminding all of you. And be mindful, your gimbal battery will thank you. So weight matters. Now another aspect, good battery capacity. Doing this with a small camera like this one, yeah, it has a tiny battery. It does not last. Like, I had 3 batteries and I was like swapping. So you have to be mindful. Here, if you are going there, must have 3 battery and must have a way to charge it while you are on scene, so to say. Thankfully, USB-C charging is a thing nowadays. So you can buy a USB-C dock where you can just put a USB-C dock where you can just put the battery and charge from a big battery bank. I was doing that, so that was like very requirement. Dual card slot. Now here it becomes important. Why? If you're capturing something that is raw or something like, hey, this individual just came here because we might like a conference that I was trying to cover. They only had like 3 days. So I had to cover everybody in 3 days, or everybody that I found interesting, or at least I could understand what the hell they were talking about. So in those sort of scenario, I could not afford to do retakes, even though people may be okay, but they will get frustrated. And another aspect is, I may not have the time. The actual expo that was so huge, nobody could actually capture whole of it. Like, it's just not doable. So in those sort of scenario, you understand retakes are not an option. Dual card slot becomes priceless. That's why in this scale, you need dual card. Like, you're like, who cares? Here's the deal. There are 2 types of people. One who have lost their data, another who's going to lose their data. There is no middle stop. So trust me, have buffer before that happens. So this was my presentation on camera use cases, part 1 of it. And I'm going to talk more about it. I hope you have liked it, learn from it. In that case, please hit the like button, share it amongst friends. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I urge you to press dislike, press it twice to show me extra disappointment. Please leave a comment because I do try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free. And as always, thanks for watching.